Well, to discuss the parliamentary logjam and the government strategy, let's go across now to our editors, Pallavi Ghosh, Bhupendra Chaubey, and our very own economic policy editor, Siddharth Zarabi. Appreciate you joining us. Pallavi, let me start by asking you, what does one make of the speculation on whether the Prime Minister is in one camp, and there has been a rift even within the Congress party itself over the issue of Ashwani Kumar and Pawan Bansal? What do we make of these rumours?
See, there's no denying the fact that both Ashwani Kumar as well as Pawan Bansal are largely seen as a PM's men. Both of them are extremely close to the Prime Minister. In fact, Pawan Bansal was in fact handpicked by the Prime Minister to become the railway minister after the Trinamool Congress walked out of the UPA. And in fact, at the UPA allies meeting which took place roughly around 3 weeks back over the Ashwani Kumar issue, when Farooq Abdullah got up to say that enough was enough and the government cannot buckle under pressure coming in from the BJP, consistently asking for the resignation of ministers, the Prime Minister actually defended him, and he was very aggressive, and we are being told by Congress sources that at that point of time Mrs. Gandhi also went on to back the Prime Minister only with the rider that the damage must be contained. Some kind of a damage control must take place. Even at the core group meeting on Saturday, after Pawan Bansal met the Prime Minister separately, and when that meeting took place in the evening, we are told that there were ministers who pointed out to the Prime Minister and to Mrs. Gandhi that the continuance of these ministers have actually become a liability. Parliament reconvenes on Monday. Why do you want to give ammunition to the opposition? At that point of time, the Prime Minister kept quiet. There was this sense which was, or the message was conveyed, Shereen, that if you ask Pawan Bansal to go, then tomorrow it will be Ashwani Kumar, and then the Prime Minister himself becomes vulnerable.
Absolutely. You know, Pallavi, you were talking about damage control, but Bhupendra, let me come to you. The government has floundered when it comes to damage control over Ashwani Kumar, Pawan Bansal, and as Pallavi was rightly pointing out, I mean, the buck really stops at the Prime Minister. But what about allies? Because we understand that today Sharad Pawar has had a meeting with crucial allies as well as several other parties, including the left. What does one make of the allies' approach to this, and what is the government strategy likely to be? Again, there's a lot of talk on back-channel talks between the BJP and the Congress president meeting Sushma Swaraj, and this was a conversation that ran into a couple of minutes, which was warm and so on and so forth. I mean, how much credence do we give to all of this, and what do you make of the allies' position in all of this?
Well, as far as the allies are concerned, those who are supporting the UPA, who are a part of the UPA, whether it's the NCP or the National Conference, most of these allies are of the view that at this stage, the government doesn't stand to gain much if they were to be thinking in terms of accepting the resignations or forcing the resignations of either the law minister or the railways minister. What has changed within the BJP camp over the last 24 hours is that within the party there has been this sense that have they already achieved the kind of political momentum they were trying to achieve by hitting out against the Congress President Sonia Gandhi herself, when Sushma Swaraj, you'll remember a few days back, attacked Sonia Gandhi and accused her of not believing in the spirit of democracy and not allowing Sushma Swaraj to make a point in Lok Sabha. The BJP believes that if an opportunity, a window can be created by the government, where the BJP also gets a chance to say that their voice has been heard, and if an all-party meeting can be called for by the Prime Minister, which will be chaired by the Prime Minister, then Sushma Swaraj's commitment of boycotting all parliamentary committee meetings also stays, and at the same time, it will look as if the spirit of democracy has ultimately triumphed. On the other side, in the ruling camp, the Congress is very, very clear. The Congress President, we hear, is absolutely adamant that the food security bill must be passed in this session. So there is a possibility of some kind of a quid pro quo, and that explains why Sonia Gandhi went to the extent of almost hugging Sushma Swaraj.
Okay, speaking of that quid pro quo, Siddharth, let me come to you on that crucial food security bill. And while we can quibble about what it will actually do to the fiscal deficit, what it will mean for the fiscal health of this country, the point is that this is an election ticket as far as the UPA is concerned, and they want to pass it through at any cost. There's been talk that if this was not to be passed by Parliament, the government could even possibly explore the ordinance route, whether or not that will actually happen or not. And even the question of the BJP actually opposing the food security bill, some saying amounts to political suicide. So what really is the fate of the food security bill to your mind at this point in time?
I've been spending time talking to BJP people about their strategy on the food bill. So clearly two things emerge, and I would sort of disagree a little bit with Bhupen here to say that I don't think what has happened with Sushma Swaraj will necessarily translate into party action. Very recently we saw a similar sort of situation where Sushma had apparently given a commitment that didn't play out. My feeling is that the BJP is prepared for a situation where the government tries to continue with the situation in Parliament, and if worse comes to worse, they will press for a a division on the floor of the House as far as this bill is concerned. That would be their last strategy. As far as the quid pro quo element is concerned, I would still say that everything will depend on the way the Supreme Court sort of takes cognizance of the Colgate matter as well as Karnataka election. So really perhaps tomorrow is when we will be getting a final idea of what the BJP may ultimately do.
Okay, Pallavi, back to you. What is going to be the government strategy? And, you know, there is a sense, and we were discussing this with Rajdeep on the show yesterday, the government's tendency to just brazen it out, and especially if they do come back in Karnataka, as our exit poll seems to suggest, they will just try and bulldoze their way through this session as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Kamal Nath giving that reaction just after the Congress core group meeting is just a giveaway of the plans within the government and the party. He came out, the results have not even come out. The counting begins tomorrow, and the Congress is already speaking as if they won the elections. I mean, on one hand, it may be a foregone conclusion, but you don't celebrate a victory even before it's happened. And there, a while earlier today, he went on to say that tomorrow we're going to win in Karnataka, and it's going to be a vindication for us, as going to be an endorsement of a stand, and the battle over corruption has already been lost out by the BJP. So that's part one of their strategy. Part two of their strategy is the fact, of course, they are going to push in through with what they call the pro-poor people's bill. They're going to talk about those game changer bills, game changer for the UPA in the next Lok Sabha elections, as the food and the land security bill. Clearly try and isolate the BJP, divide the opposition, and point out that we wanted to show our intent by bringing the bills, but the BJP did not want these bills to come up.
Okay, Bhupendra, Siddharth, my final question to the both of you now. The spectre of early elections, you know, up until this session of Parliament, the view was that they will push it along till next year, and we are probably going to not be faced with a very early election, perhaps at the start of next year. The possibility of now an earlier election, Bhupendra, starting with you.
Well, I think that politics is all about picking up straws in the wind, and just going by the manner in which the government has been expressing its keenness to pass through some of the key social sector regulations, social sector legislations, it seems as if the government is ready that if you can, in this so-called environment of anti-corruption movement across the country, if you can win a state like Himachal Pradesh, if you can win a state like Karnataka, if you can put your own house in order, the government would hope that maybe this entire anti-corruption talk is essentially meant for television studios and maybe some urban pockets across the country. It believes that it is still in a position in which, if having passed through some of these key legislations, particularly the food security bill, it believes that it will have a game changer. It will have a potential election talking point. And in that case, it can think in terms of going in for elections simultaneously around September, October, when the round of assembly elections to take place, including the key states of Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Delhi and Chhattisgarh. I think that there is a 60 to 70% possibility, Shereen, of elections coinciding along with those 4 to 5 states.
Siddharth, you disagreed with Bhupendra at least slightly in the previous question. Let me ask you, do you agree with what Bhupendra just had to say in terms of the possibility of an early election coinciding with the assembly elections, or we're talking actually September, October?
Completely. This time I do agree with Bhupendra, and in fact, if the food bill is passed in the 2 days of the budget session, we will probably see an allocation for the food security expenditure when Finance Minister seeks a further approval from Parliament in the monsoon session through a demand for grants. At that stage, depending on the amount that he seeks, will I probably have a sense that they are going to go full ahead with elections. Otherwise, if that doesn't happen, I would say read the number of allocation for the food security bill to decide when this government is really going to try their luck at the hustings.
All right. So, Pallavi, Bhupendra, Siddharth, appreciate you joining us here on India Business Hour with your thoughts on the government strategy to fight back and try and put some control into this current situation, which has just gone from bad to worse. Appreciate you joining us here on India.